The night was unusually silent, yet a sense of unease lingered in the air. The narrator, staying in a hotel near the heart of Egypt, found himself restless. From his window, he could see the silhouette of a mosque, ancient, majestic, and strangely abandoned. At first, it seemed like any other old building, but then came the sounds. They were faint at first, like whispers carried by the wind, but soon they grew louder, echoing with an intensity that tugged at his curiosity. Against his better judgment, he felt drawn to the mosque. Though he had no business there, something inside urged him to go. Stepping outside, he walked the short distance from the hotel to the mosque. The streets were quiet, only the distant hum of night insects filling the air. As he pushed open the creaking door, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Darkness wrapped around him, the kind of darkness that seemed alive, pressing against the skin, whispering doubts into the mind. He tried to steady his breath, convincing himself it was only his imagination. But the silence was broken again, soft footsteps behind him. He turned, his heart thundering, and froze. Two young women stood just inside the entrance. Their beauty was striking, almost unearthly, their long hair cascading over bare shoulders. Yet their appearance unsettled him, for their bodies were only half covered, their clothing more revealing than modest. Their smiles were faint, their eyes locked onto his, and for a moment he forgot where he was. The strangeness of the situation struck him. This was a mosque, a sacred place, yet these women seemed out of place, almost like illusions brought to life. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. He felt as though he had stepped into a test far beyond his understanding. The whispers he had heard earlier now seemed connected to their presence. The narrator's breath quickened. He was no stranger to hardship. His life had been filled with burdens of responsibility, particularly for his mentally ill sister. But this was different. This was a kind of trial that attacked the soul rather than the body. The longer he looked at the women, the heavier the air seemed to grow, as though the very walls of the mosque were holding their breath. He stepped back, unable to speak, his thoughts spinning. Why were they here? Who had sent them? And why did their beauty feel less like a blessing and more like a weapon? With every passing second, unease deepened inside him. The night had just begun, and already he sensed that what lay ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. Long before the mysterious night in Egypt, the narrator's life had already been shaped by hardship. He grew up in a small village where poverty and responsibility pressed upon his shoulders from a young age. His father was absent from the picture, leaving his mother and younger sister as the only family he had. His sister, born fragile and different, struggled with a severe mental illness. She had moments when she was partly aware of herself, but as the years passed, her condition worsened until she no longer recognized her own dignity. Sometimes she dressed herself, but often she wandered half-clothed, lost in confusion, and oblivious to the stares of others. While his mother lived, caring for the girl was at least manageable. She devoted her days to protecting her daughter, shielding her from ridicule and ensuring she was fed and clothed, but when illness claimed his mother's life, the entire responsibility fell to him. He was not just her brother anymore, he became her sole guardian. And though he was 16 years older, he felt more like a father raising a helpless child than a sibling sharing blood. Marriage had promised him relief, a partner who could help bear life's weight. At first, his wife tried to adapt, but she soon grew weary. She resented the endless interruptions, the sudden fits, the destroyed meals, the nights cut short by screams. In her eyes, their home was no home at all, but a prison built by his sister's illness. "You must choose," she had told him once, her voice cold. "Hire a nurse for her or let me leave." But he had no money to afford professional care. Nurses charged more than he could ever pay with his modest earnings. So, she left him. After only a year and a half of marriage, she packed her belongings and walked away, leaving him with a broken heart and a burden he could not set down. At first, he felt anger. Why couldn't she understand? But with time, he realized she too was a victim of a life too heavy to carry. His sister's condition only worsened. She became completely unaware of herself, not recognizing people, not even recognizing him at times. Her laughter was sudden, her tears without cause, and her fits terrifying. Friends and relatives tried to help, but none lasted more than a few days. One by one, they gave up. He remained alone with her. The narrator often sat by her side at night, staring at the walls, wondering how his life had turned into this endless duty. She was like a daughter to him, someone he loved but could never free from suffering. In those long years, he learned the cruel weight of responsibility and the silence of sacrifice. The years passed in a blur of sorrow and endurance. Each day felt like a repetition of the last, moments of calm broken by sudden storms of his sister's illness. Yet somewhere deep inside, the narrator carried hope. Perhaps there would be a cure. Perhaps someone, somewhere, had the knowledge to restore her fragile mind. That fragile hope became his anchor, the only thing that kept him moving forward. One day, he heard whispers about a famous doctor. People said this physician was a miracle worker, someone who had healed patients that others had abandoned. But such miracles came at a price. The doctor's consultation fee was enormous, enough to crush a poor man's spirit. He charged 30,000 rupees for barely half an hour, an amount the narrator could scarcely imagine, let alone pay. At first, he dismissed the idea. It was impossible. But the thought lingered. If there was even a chance that his sister could live a normal life, wasn't it worth trying? He began to gather money, sacrificing his own needs, borrowing small amounts, scraping together every coin he could. It took time, but at last he had enough. With trembling hands, he booked an appointment. Half the fee was sent in advance. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe things would change. He pictured his sister laughing like other young women, walking freely in the streets, even building a life of her own. But life, cruel as ever, had other plans. Before the appointment date arrived, tragedy struck. One morning, as he went to wake her, he found her lying unnaturally still. Her breathing had stopped, her eyes closed forever in a silence he could not bear. She had left this world in her sleep, without warning, without farewell. The narrator's world shattered. He stood over her lifeless body, feeling an emptiness so vast it swallowed everything else. Regret clawed at him. If only he had managed to take her sooner, if only the money had been ready earlier. Perhaps the doctor could have helped. Perhaps she would still be alive. Those thoughts tormented him endlessly. When he called the doctor to cancel, he expected indifference. But to his surprise, the doctor returned the advance payment. The money came back to him, heavy and meaningless. He stared at it, wondering bitterly what use it had now. The one person he had struggled for, the one life he had hoped to save, was gone. It was then that a friend approached him with a suggestion. A missionary group was preparing to travel to Egypt. "Come with us," his friend said. Your heart is heavy. Perhaps this journey will give you peace. When his friend extended the invitation, the narrator felt torn. His heart was still bleeding from his sister's death. Could travel to a foreign land truly bring him peace? Yet something within urged him to go. Perhaps distance from familiar sorrows, from the house that echoed with his sister's absence, might soothe his mind. He decided to join the missionary group. With the same money once reserved for his sister's treatment, he now paid for the journey, a bitter irony he could not ignore. The group set out, carrying with them the spirit of devotion. The narrator was not deeply pious before, but grief has a way of steering the heart toward faith. He clung to the hope that in Egypt he might find not only spiritual growth but also relief from the crushing weight of guilt. The voyage was long and exhausting, but when they arrived in Egypt, a sense of awe overcame him. The country was unlike anything he had imagined. Ancient stone buildings standing proudly beside bustling streets, markets rich with spices and fabrics, and the wide Nile flowing like a ribbon of history through the land. Cairo itself hummed with life, yet beneath its chaos, there was a strange calm. What struck him most were the women. Their beauty seemed otherworldly, their features refined, their presence radiant even without effort. Unlike the women he had seen in his homeland, they appeared untouched by the burdens of vanity. These were not women hidden away in salons or obsessed with powders and perfumes. Their beauty was natural, effortless, and overwhelming. The narrator remembered the old saying that the prophet Joseph's beauty was divided, with 3 parts gifted to Egypt and 1 to the rest of the world. Here, he began to believe it was true. For the first time since his sister's passing, he felt a measure of wonder stir in his heart. Yet he was not here for leisure. His days were filled with prayer, teaching, and learning. The group would gather in mosques, speak to locals, and share words of encouragement. Slowly, he began to feel his chest lighten. At night, when he lay awake, the pain of loss was still there, but Egypt's air carried with it a strange comfort, as though the land itself offered healing. Then came a moment that shifted everything. One evening, a local man told them about a mosque, a 400-year-old structure closed for 80 years, abandoned, locked, and shrouded in whispers. "Why closed?" someone asked. The man only shook his head. Strange things happen there. Whoever enters does not return. The narrator's heart quickened. A mosque, silent for 8 decades? To him, it was unthinkable. A house of God should never remain deserted. Suspicion and curiosity began to grow. The news of the abandoned mosque spread quickly among the group, stirring both intrigue and unease. A 400-year-old mosque, once filled with worshippers, now standing silent for 80 years. It was a story too strange to ignore. Some of the younger men dismissed it as a tale born of superstition, while others whispered about spirits, curses, and vanished souls. But for the narrator, the thought was intolerable. How could a house of God remain locked, gathering dust while the faithful prayed outside? Determined to learn the truth, they asked the local man more questions. He explained that the keys were said to be with the last appointed caretaker, a man who had once served as the imam. Without hesitation, the group decided to find him. They walked through narrow lanes until they reached his small shop, where he sat behind the counter, his face lined with worry. When they greeted him and asked for the key, his response was unexpected. "I no longer have it," he muttered. "It was lost long ago." The narrator studied the man's trembling hands and the fear in his eyes. Something about him felt evasive, as though the story he gave was only half the truth. "How can the key be lost?" one of the missionaries pressed. "You were the imam. The mosque is entrusted to you. Why was it locked in the first place?" The man's voice lowered. "Do not ask. Do not try to open it. For your own good, stay away. Those who enter one, do not return. I will not speak of it further." With that, he refused to answer more questions. His fear was palpable, as if even mentioning the mosque invited danger. The group left his shop, exchanging uneasy glances. For some, his words were enough warning to abandon the idea. But for the narrator, suspicion only deepened. "Have you never heard," he told his companions, "that people spread rumors of spirits to drive others away? It is an old trick. You declare a place haunted, and soon enough, no one dares to go near it. Then when the land is worthless, you claim it. That mosque sits on a valuable site. Perhaps this man and others have their eyes on it. Perhaps they want to erase it to build something else." His reasoning resonated with several in the group. They were convinced the mosque had not fallen under a curse, but rather under the schemes of people who sought worldly gain. Yet the chilling thought remained. What if the warnings held truth? What if something far darker lay beyond those locked doors? As night approached, their decision grew firm. They would not turn back. The mosque would be opened, no matter what awaited inside. The decision was made, but fate had yet to reveal its hand. That evening, while the narrator stood outside a tea shop, turning the caretaker's fearful words over in his mind, an encounter unsettled him further. From the corner of his eye, he noticed an old woman shuffling past. At first, he thought nothing of it, just another passerby, bent with age. But then she slowed, turned her veiled face toward him, and spoke in clear Urdu. "Leave this place, my son. Go back while you can." The narrator stiffened. Urdu? In Egypt? It was rare enough to hear a familiar language here, but coming from the lips of a stranger made his blood run cold. He asked hesitantly, "Are you speaking to me?" "Yes," she replied, her voice low and heavy. "I see death written on your forehead. You should not have come here. Your time is short and danger stands close. If you enter that mosque, you will not return alive." A chill swept through him. He had heard similar words from the caretaker, but this felt different. Personal, intimate, as though she could peer into his soul. He forced a laugh, masking his unease. "We believe life and death belong only to God," he said firmly. "No one can predict the hour of a man's end." The woman tilted her head, studying him with eyes that seemed older than time. "Perhaps you are brave," she said. "Or perhaps you are foolish. But mark my words, you are walking toward your doom. Something waits for you there. It will not let you go." With that, she turned abruptly and vanished into a narrow alley. He followed, but she was gone, swallowed by the maze of streets. Her final words lingered in his ears, unsettling his resolve. Later, when he rejoined his companions, he chose not to tell them everything. He mentioned only that a strange woman had warned him to stay away. Predictably, they brushed it off. Superstition, one said, huh? Old women thrive on fear. Another added, if anything, her warning proves we must go. Why else would people be so determined to keep the mosque shut? But deep inside, the narrator could not shake the image of her eyes, haunted, knowing, almost pitying. He tried to steady his heart. Faith must be stronger than fear, he reminded himself. That night, the group resolved to act. They would break the lock, enter the mosque, and reclaim it as a house of worship. Whatever lay inside, they would face it together. The night had fallen heavy upon Cairo, the streets quieter than usual, the moon casting pale light across the rooftops. The group gathered at the edge of the ancient mosque, their breaths misting in the cool air. The iron lock, rusted and scarred by time, hung defiantly on the old wooden door. For 80 years, no prayer had echoed inside these walls. The silence seemed alive, as if the building itself held its breath. The narrator's heart pounded as he stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly, though he masked it behind determination. "This is a house of God," he said to his companions. "No lock, no tail, no fear should keep us away." With a single strike of a heavy tool, the lock snapped. The sound echoed like thunder in the empty street, and for a moment they all stood frozen. Then, pushing against the creaking doors, they entered. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of abandonment. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and a thin layer of sand covered the marble floor. Yet, beneath the decay, the mosque was magnificent. Arched ceilings, ornate calligraphy fading with age, and carved pillars that had once held the weight of centuries of worshippers. Their lanterns illuminated fragments of beauty, reminders of what the mosque had once been. Without hesitation, they set to work. They swept the floors, cleared debris, and lit what lamps they could. The narrator felt an unexpected joy rise within him. For the first time in decades, this sacred place was being revived. When they fetched water to make ablution, the act felt symbolic, as though they were washing away not only the dust, but the fear that had clung to the mosque for generations. Soon the call to prayer echoed through the halls. The narrator's voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as it carried into the night. The sound filled the mosque, spilling into the streets beyond. It was as if the very stones rejoiced, awakened from their long slumber. Yet even in this moment of triumph, unease lurked. As they prayed together, he sensed something, eyes watching, a presence beyond the walls. When the final words of the prayer faded, the silence that followed was deeper than before. Then at the entrance, a shadow moved. They turned and saw her, an older woman veiled, standing at the threshold, her figure lit faintly by the lantern glow. She did not step inside at first, only watched. When finally she entered, her voice rang cold. "Leave while you still can. This place does not belong to you." The companions exchanged wary glances. The narrator's breath caught in his throat. Was this the same woman who had warned him before? The appearance of the veiled woman unsettled everyone. She stood in the doorway like a figure cut from stone, her voice steady, her eyes unreadable. "You should not be here," she said again, her words heavy with warning. "This place swallows men whole. If you remain, your faith will be tested, and many of you will fall." The missionaries shifted uneasily. Some whispered prayers under their breath, others tried to mask their fear with defiance. The narrator stepped forward, refusing to be cowed. "This is a mosque," he said firmly. "It belongs to God, not to you, not to me, not to anyone else. We came to restore it. If you are truly faithful, then join us. If not, then leave." For a moment, the woman's expression faltered. Her lips curved into something like a smile, but it was thin and cold. "Very well," she murmured. "Then stay. But when night deepens, remember my words." With that, she turned and disappeared into the darkness outside, leaving a silence heavy enough to press on their chests. The group tried to dismiss the encounter. They ate the food they had brought, sat in small circles, and spoke of their lives back home. Yet beneath their words, tension ran like an undercurrent. The narrator alone seemed restless. He could not forget the woman's eyes, nor the warning she had given earlier in the day. As midnight approached, a sudden noise broke the uneasy calm. It came from the storage room at the back of the mosque, a scuffling, a thud, as though something moved inside. The men exchanged glances, hesitant. Fear crept into their voices. "She said this would happen," one whispered. She said we'd regret staying after dark. Determined to prove their courage, two of them volunteered to investigate. The narrator joined them, lantern in hand. The small storage chamber smelled of dust and decay. At first, they saw nothing. Then, from the far corner, a shadow shifted. The narrator's heart leapt, only to find a stray cat darting out, its yellow eyes glinting in the lamplight. Relief rippled through the group when they returned with the explanation, but unease remained. Some men laughed nervously, mocking their own fear. Others sat in silence, their gazes fixed on the dark corners of the mosque. Then it happened. Without warning, every lantern flickered and died. The mosque plunged into blackness so thick it seemed to suffocate. And when the lights returned moments later, two young women stood before them, radiant, beautiful beyond imagination, their smiles sharp as blades. They wore little more than fragments of clothing, their hair flowing like rivers of shadow. Their eyes glowed with unnatural brightness, and their voices, sweet yet chilling, rang out, "We are here for you." Come closer, the men stared, entranced. The narrator felt his chest tighten. This was no ordinary test. This was temptation in its purest, most dangerous form. The two women stood before them, dazzling and terrifying at the same time. Their beauty was unreal, almost inhuman. Long black hair cascaded over their shoulders, their skin glowed faintly in the lantern light, and their lips curved in smiles that seemed to promise every forbidden desire. They raised their hands, beckoning softly. "We are here for you," they said again, their voices weaving into the air like a spell. The men around the narrator froze as though bewitched. Their eyes widened and their breaths grew heavy. One of them muttered under his breath, "They look like angels, like Houras from paradise." Another reached a trembling hand forward, caught in the pull of temptation. The narrator's own heart stuttered. For a fleeting moment, he too felt the grip of their allure. Memories of loneliness surged. His wife who had left him, the long years of emptiness, the ache of desire suppressed by duty. It would have been so easy to step forward, to surrender. But then, like a flash of lightning, another memory cut through the haze. He saw his sister, her fragile figure, her torn clothes, her confused eyes, when she would wander without knowing what she did. He remembered covering her with his own shawl so that no one could see her in her vulnerable state. That same instinct of protection rose within him now, stronger than the pull of temptation. "No!" he cried, his voice breaking the spell. He rushed forward, tore off his cloak, and threw it over the women, covering their exposed bodies. "These are deceivers! Do you not see? This is a trap!" His companions blinked, startled out of their trance. Some stepped back in shame, realizing how close they had come to ruin. But others resisted, anger flashing in their eyes. "What is wrong with you?" one snapped. "They came for us." "Why stop us?" The narrator faced them, trembling but resolute. "Have you forgotten where you stand? This is a mosque, a house of God, and you want to defile it with sin? These are no angels. They are snares meant to destroy your faith. The old woman warned us. Do you not see the truth?" The women's smiles faltered, their eyes hardening. They whispered in a language none could understand, their voices no longer sweet but sharp, venomous. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The narrator pushed them toward the exit, his voice fierce. "Leave this place." With one last chilling glance, the women slipped into the darkness. At that very moment, the lanterns flickered out again, plunging the mosque into total blackness. From outside came the sound of the heavy doors slamming shut. The men stumbled to the entrance, pulling desperately at the handles. But no matter how they tried, the doors would not open. They were trapped inside the ancient mosque, surrounded by an unseen force. The night inside the mosque stretched endlessly. Every attempt to open the heavy doors failed. Some men sat against the walls, whispering prayers, their faces pale with dread. Others argued in low voices, still shaken by the sight of the mysterious women. The narrator remained standing near the pulpit, his fists clenched. He could feel his own fear gnawing at him, but beneath it was a spark of defiance. "This is a house of God," he kept repeating to himself. "No darkness can hold us here forever." Hours dragged by, and at last the faint gray of dawn began to seep through the high windows. With the first rays of light, the oppressive weight seemed to lift. They tried the doors again, and this time, with a groan of ancient hinges, they opened. The men stumbled outside into the cool morning air, breathing deeply as though they had escaped a grave. Their ordeal quickly became the talk of the town. Curious villagers and members of the market committee gathered, demanding to know what had happened. The narrator and his companions explained everything: the veiled woman, the seductive figures, the slamming doors. An elder of the town listened gravely, then nodded as though pieces were falling into place. He told them of a non-Muslim woman who had laid claim to the land generations ago. Her family had argued that the mosque was built on their ancestral property. When they failed to win the case, she began spreading rumors that the mosque was cursed. Over the years, the story grew. People vanished, spirits haunted the halls, evil awaited inside. Fear did the rest. One by one, the villagers abandoned it, and eventually the doors were locked. The elder leaned closer. "The woman you saw," said I, "may have been her or her daughters. They are known to use deception. Perhaps they sent those girls to test you, to lure you into sin and disgrace, so that people would believe the mosque was truly defiled." The group exchanged uneasy glances. The narrator felt both relief and anger. Relief that there was a human explanation, anger that the house of God had been slandered for so long. "Then we must restore it," he said firmly. "We must cleanse it of lies." And so they did. In the days that followed, they cleaned the mosque, repaired its lamps, and called the faithful to prayer. Slowly, people returned. The sound of worship once again filled the halls, chasing away decades of silence. As they prepared to leave Egypt, the narrator's companions praised him. "You saved us. They told him, "Nae, your warning kept our faith from crumbling." He smiled faintly, though his eyes were clouded. "It was not me," he said quietly. "It was my sister. When I saw those women, I remembered her, and her suffering saved me from falling." He carried her memory home with him, no longer only a source of grief, but also of strength. Her absence still hurt, but now he understood. Sometimes love continues to protect us long after the person is gone.